In this devlog, I'll be trying to I'll try to create a bot for cryptocurrency trading using Ruby and the Bittrex.com exchange platform. So I've been having I've actually started investing in cryptocurrencies starting I think it was August of this year, and it's been a good ride. I've been I also tried out mining as well as buying other altcoins aside from the usual Bitcoin. So I've chosen Bittrex.com as my primary source for trading altcoins as well as Bitcoin, and I'm using the Bitcoin market, right? And the main problem I'm having with this particular venture is that I always keep checking out the charts or the prices, right? So following the general rule of thumb for a certain coin, let's say for Monero or XMR, if the price is low, then you buy, and if it reaches some sort of peak, then you sell and hopefully gain a profit out of it. However, this task of monitoring these values are quite tedious. So I've decided to create an automated bot that will monitor the prices all the time, because the prices here are very volatile and it's running 24/7. So I wouldn't have the time to actually monitor them in real time and make that bot essentially or eventually do trading for me. So in this part of this series, I'll be attempting to create a bot that will read off the values of Bittrex.com, as well as define a target when I would like to, well, in the first part, when I would like to sell this particular coin. So, for example, if my previous buy, based on the values, the value of a coin, let's say XMR, based on the value of XMR at the time I actually bought XMR, if that value increases 5%, 5% being my targeted increase in profit, then I would allow the bot to sell whatever I bought, right? And it's actually simple, nothing fancy. I actually tried this a while back before, but I wasn't able to continue it that much. So it would be nice to actually share the experience in building another one of these, especially since the Bittrex's API changed the last time I actually attempted this. So, all right. So with that, I guess I can get started. So I have my usual. It's actually just a plain old Ruby app. So I'm just using Bundler to manage my dependencies, and I'll only be using two in this case: HTTParty to actually fetch the values, and JSON to have a config file right here, which will store the necessary parameters when querying against Bittrex's API. So in this config file, I have my base coin, which is BTC, and let's say that I'd like to target XMR, or the coin I've been trying to buy. So I'm trying to make this program as atomic as possible so that I can run, let's say, multiple instances of this program eventually for multiple coins, diversifying my portfolio, right? And I'm currently using the latest version of the API as of this recording, which is version 1.1. This is the base URL of Bittrex. And if you want to use Bittrex's API, they actually have this. You're required to supply two parameters when you create a request against your account: the API key and the API secret, both of which can be applied or can be taken from your account settings. Let me just show it right here under the API key section, as well as the IP whitelist section. Now, the API keys, of course, will store your API key and secret, while the IP whitelist will allow addresses to query against the Bittrex platform. So I put here my local address so I can actually use it in my local host. Right. So again, let's say I'm targeting XRP or Monero coin. Let me just try to find it. Okay, there, XMR rather. XRP is Ripple, sorry. All right, so the first thing I'd like to achieve for this video is to be able to read these values, right? The last, the bid, and the ask values, as well as the current ticker price. Okay, so I know if it's actually low or it's actually high. Going back to the config, I decided to store some other parameters. For example, for the last cell, which actually points to the amount or the cost of one of these coins in terms of Bitcoin. So it's like saying one Monero would cost 0.019629998 Bitcoin based on my last sell. Of course, this is an arbitrary value. I didn't actually sell on this point, but just for development purposes, I'm having this as a parameter. Now I also have a parameter called target sell, which dictates my current target, right? If I bought Monero at this Bitcoin price, I'd like to wait for it to increase at least 2% before trying to sell it. And I have the two endpoints here, the balance and the ticker endpoint, which is defined, of course, in Bittrex's API documentation, wherein balance will get my current balance for this particular coin, and ticker will get the ticker values for this particular coin, right? So the first thing I'll have to do is to read through the config file, right? I actually have two config files stored here, a dist file, which is the one you're viewing here, and the actual config file, which I should read because, of course, I wouldn't want to broadcast my API and my secret. So, okay, let me just make sure I have the proper dependencies installed. All right, so after that, I'll first have to read the config file. I'll call it in a variable called config, and I'll try to open up that file in config.json, right? And of course, I'd like to parse that particular file. So json.parse config file, and let's try to print out the market, right? So the market will be, well, according to Bittrex's API, the market is defined as a string wherein you have something like BTC, the base coin. Actually, it's just, I think, BTC or ETH or USDT for the US dollar. But in this case, I'm using the BTC coin, so it should be something like BTC XMR, right? So of course, I'd read these values from my config file, base coin and market coin, right? So this would be config base coin, right? And config, whoops, market coin. Okay, hope I got that correct. Okay, let's just try to display this and see if we actually got it correct. All right, so I'll print out the market. I'll run this ruby main.rb. All right, so we have an error. Gem file, uninitialized constant bundler cannot continue. That's weird. I have it right there. Line 6. What's wrong with my line 6? Alright, it should have worked. I think I'm missing something. Yeah, I'm missing something. Okay, let me just search through that. Got how to do using Ruby bundler. Actually, I can just look through Bundler's website. Alright, Bundler, I think I should install something else. Something like setup. Setup. How does Bundler work? Oh, right. Sorry, I was actually editing. I was editing the gem file instead of the main.rb file. All right. Okay. So I have my main.rb file right here. It requires Ruby gems, bundler setup. Sorry, the one I was showing you was the gem file, which includes the gem, my dependencies, HTTParty and gem.json, and then my main.rb file will contain the actual references to the libraries I need, right? Which are the Ruby gems, boundary setup, HTTParty, JSON, base64, and CGI. So let's repeat that again. I'm going to go ahead and parse whatever the config file is as a JSON object using file.new config.json. Right? I'm going to try to display out the market, which is equal to my base coin, which is in BTC, dash the market coin, right? Which in this case is XMR, for example. I'm going to go ahead and display that, and let's try to run this. Okay. So I have another error here. Why so? File.new. Actually, forgot how to do this thing. I'm pretty sure it's something like json.parse, and then you're gonna read the file config.json. Oh, it's file.read, sorry. File.read, right? Sorry, that's my, right. There we go, right? So it's reading the values of my, my config file. Okay, so let's put a bit of text there. All right. Now let's probably set up the skeleton in order to fetch those prices, right? It's also worth noting that there are existing Bittrex Ruby gems out there, right? So you could use this. However, again, in devlogs, we'd like to discuss the probably as we would like to go as low as possible so that we can discuss the different intricacies of software development with the least dependencies as possible, right? But this one is actually pretty good. You can use this to interact with Bittrex's API. But a change in the API would require this software to actually adapt to those changes. So right, so rolling your own software will allow you to control whatever changes are needed immediately without having to wait for that library to actually update. Right, but anyway, let's get back to development. So I know I can print out the market. The next thing I'll do is I'll perform a loop. Right, so while true, I'll perform this loop and wait 5 seconds. So what this loop will do is that at every iteration of this loop, it will continuously poll the Bittrex trading platform and try to get those values according to the market variable right here. Okay? So if you take a look at Bittrex's API, right, we can get those values for a certain coin. See, they're actually deprecating version 1. We can get those values using I'm using the public get ticker, which is the data that's being fed off from here, right? So I want to get the latest value at a given time. So the way that works is that, right, you perform a get against this this base URL, okay, public get ticker, and you get a response that looks something like this, which contains the bid, the ask, and the last price, right? So you're going to go ahead and use HTTParty to try to perform a GET request against this endpoint and read it as a JSON file within this particular loop, okay? So I'll say something like result, or rather response, is equal to HTTParty, hope I got that correct, dot get. Okay, now I have to form the URL. Okay, the URL for the ticker, okay, I call it URL ticker, will be equal to the base URL. Okay, base URL, so that would come from my config / the endpoint, Okay, so I have the endpoint right here for ticker. Okay, also from the config endpoints ticker. Okay, right. So the base URL doesn't have a forward slash at the end, and my ticker URL has a forward slash in the end. So I have to clean that up a bit. But basically, if we have that, then I don't need this forward slash right here. Okay. And the reason behind that is because later on we'll be encrypting this URL ticker together with the parameters whenever we pass an API sign, or basically a way to validate the authenticity for this particular API call. But more on that later. I guess we'll have to form first the response. Right, so I'm performing a get against the URL ticker. Right, and according to the API, you have to pass a market parameter, which looks something like this. So your base coin, and the coin that you'd like to query data against, right? So in this case, LTC, or in my case, XMR. Now in HTTParty, you pass that using a query hash, right? And then I'll pass there the parameter market and say market. Right? Let's see if we get this response. I think it's something like response.body. I'm then just gonna put the body right there. And all right, so what this code will do is it will try to perform a get request against this URL using the market as my parameter and pasting out the results, waiting 5 seconds before it loops again. Okay. Let's try to run that. Okay, hopefully it works. Okay, so it didn't work. See why. It's actually returning HTML. So we have an error right there, 404 not found. Why so? Why so? Huh. Let me go ahead and display this URL that was just built. API. Oh, I forgot something. Whenever we're making a request against Bittrex's API, we have to include the version number, right? So it's actually the base URL plus the version number, and then the actual URI for the API call, for the endpoint. Okay, so let's just go ahead and modify that. Clear this thing. Okay, I actually keep, right, an API version parameter right there. So it has to be something like /config API version. And hopefully this will work. So I'm gonna go ahead and put response.body, which is the expected result. Okay, hopefully this works. Come on, it's not working. Puts response.body. I think it's working because let's just put response and see what happens. Oh, there we go. Right, waits 5 seconds. Okay, there we go. Now it's working. So the response itself. Oh, okay. So the response itself will be the actual body for the endpoint, the response of the endpoint. So what we need is this result variable. Okay, result variable. So I think I can query that by I need to parse it, I guess, as a JSON, right? So I'll say result is equal to JSON.parse response, right? So I can treat the result as a JSON object, and then I need the bid, the last, and the ask price. So I have those parameters. I'll say our bid, our last, our ask. Let's put this in order, right? Which is coming from result. So I'll say result bid down to the spelling, result ask, and finally result last. Okay, and then instead of dumping the entire response, what we can do is we can display this. I'll say something like bid, our bid, put a couple of tabs there, ask, our ask, and finally last, our last, right? Okay, let's see if this works. So I just formatted those values. Well, actually, I have to get this from result. I think something like that. All right, because that's the key in the JSON object that was just returned by this endpoint. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, it didn't work. Implicit conversion of hash into string. Maybe I can use it directly. I don't think I need to convert this to a JSON object. Okay, there we go. Right, so after 5 seconds, it should try to poll the server again, and then you're getting the prices, the ask price, and the last price for this particular coin, XMR. Of course, against the base coin BTC, right? It's a long 5 seconds. How was it query? I think it's my connection. Let's try that again. Alright, so at least it's working. Pretty long 5 seconds. I guess my internet connection's not that good. Alright, okay, so now that we have those values, the next thing we would do is to try to see if we can get the value based on the last sell of this coin. Let's say I actually bought XMR at this value, and when the price increases or the bid increases by 2% given by the parameter target sell, then I'll tell the bot to actually sell my XMR, right? So I can actually leave it on and wait for the market to reach 2% above my previous buy for this particular coin, and then basically sell my stuff at a profit, right? I know that it's a very simplified model, but actually it's been working for me for the past 6 months, I guess. All right. Okay, so let's declare the target, right? So the target is equal to config target, right? To F, right? I'll force it to be a floating point number. Now, once I have that, so I'll get the bid price, right? I'll force this to become a floating point number, actually for the others as well. To F, okay? And what I'll do is I'll check the jump, right? So we can compute that by saying the bid price. Okay, so we'll get the net difference between the bid price and the amount, the last sell price. Okay, so that difference and that ratio between that difference will be the actual percentage difference. The ratio will be the percentage difference between my last sell price and the R bid price, which can be computed by, okay, I'll just say net diff will be equal to, I'm not mistaken, R bid minus my target. Oh no, not my target, but rather my last sell price. So that should be last sell will be config last sell to F. Right. Just fix those stuff there. Say R bid minus last sell. Okay, so if R bid is actually less than the last sell, then I have a negative percentage gain. But if the R bid is greater than the last sell, then I have a positive net value, right? Meaning I can actually sell the coin higher than I actually bought it. But I want it to be a percentage, so I should divide this by, what's the correct formula? The bid price minus the last sell over the last sell, if I'm not mistaken. All right, and that will be a percentage value that I can multiply to 100. Actually, I'll keep this. Net diff, and I'll say net diff formatted, which will be the net diff times 100, so I can display it in my output right here. Okay, I'll say net will be equal to net diff percent. Right? Okay, so let's see this. Let's see this code. Let's see this in action, and let's try to run it. Right? So it shows here that using my last sell price. Okay, hang on. Let me just display that last sell price. Actually, I'll include it here, so it's in case the output gets too long, I can review. Review the values, last sell, right? Okay, let's try this again. All right, so we have there, this is the bid. This was the last price I actually sold Monero, and I actually have a net of negative 7%. Right, so it doesn't really reach my target. I'll have to wait for it to reach 2% before I actually try to sell this particular coin. Right? Okay, so that's it. So, well, not it yet, right? But rather, if you notice, we're actually retrieving values from Bittrex's API, and it doesn't change much for 5 seconds. So maybe I should increase this to something like 10 seconds. Okay, it doesn't change at all that much. Well, this part, it already changed. But you can set it whatever you want. So you can set it to 10 seconds. You can set it to a minute, to 5 minutes. But one thing I learned in cryptocurrencies is that the market changes drastically. Like in a split second, no, not really a split second, but in a second, the market can just basically crash. Just like what happened to Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash rather, in a matter of minutes, it went from $1,600 down to around $1,400. But the same can be said for the opposite of that, wherein if the price actually increases and you're not aware of that increase, then you would have probably missed out your chance. So it's nice that we have a bot to actually monitor it, and we can go ahead and do something else like eat. Eat food, sleep, and let the bot do the trading work. Basically replaces the middleman in terms of trading, right? All right, so now that I can read those values, the last thing I'll try to do is to read my current balance. Okay, so in Bittrex, you have certain balances here, right? Let's say for XMR, okay, you have your own wallet. Let's say I'm trading XMR. I'd like to get the value for my current wallet, so that probably in the next devlog for this series, I'll use a portion, or even not a portion, just like every coin for XMR, I'll sell it for the price if it goes above 2%, right? But for this part, I'll try to query the my current balance for XMR. Okay, and to do that, we'll be using another endpoint called the balance endpoint. Right? So I'll have it right here, right before I display my stuff. Okay, I'll have URL balance is equal to very similar to this one. So I'll just actually copy paste this, change ticker to balance. Now this is where I sort of took a while. It sort of took a while for me to figure out how to query against the balance, because this time around we'll be passing our API key as well as our API secret, right? aside from that, I actually learned that we have to include other parameters as well, such as the signage, signing the API, encrypting it using HMAC 512 SHA-1 encryption, uh, as well as a noise. Sorry, not noise. I forgot what it's called. I have my notes here. We need to pass a signage as well as the signage will be passed in the responses header, or rather in the requests header, while the while a noise value, oh no NCE value will be passed together with the actual URL. Okay, and it will be encrypting that URL. So the way it goes is that, all right. So we'll change this to balance. Okay, so now it's currently balance, and we'll include the parameters together with the URL because it's a GET request, right? So all the parameters happen right after the question mark for the URL. So I'll have here my API key, which is equal to Parse API key. I need that variable right here, which is also from my config file. API key is equal to config API key, right? I'll also need my secret, which will be included in the encrypted string that we pass to the Bittrex API. Okay, API secret. Just fix my alignment here. All right. So I'll include the API key. The secret will not be included there. However, we'll include a timestamp for the NONCE. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. NONCE. I'm sorry, my face is blocking code. All right, NONCE parameter, which is equal to, you can just do something like time.now.i, which is an integer value of a unique a time string, right? So it changes every time, and we have to basically encrypt this using HMAC. Right? That's why I included the base64 CGI libraries from Ruby for us to encrypt this, and I'll call that signature sign. Okay, sign will be equal to OpenSSL HMAC.Hex Digest, and the trick here is to, okay, we'll be using SHA-512 encryption. Okay, and then we'll be taking the API secret and encoding it as ASCII. So encode ASCII, as well as the endpoint, right, which is the URL balance. Okay, so URL balance dot encode ASCII as well. Right, so we hex digest that, and we pass it as part of the header whenever we make a GET request against Bittrex. So our response will now be HTTParty.get. Okay, we'll just pass the endpoint, which is the URL balance, right? And then we'll pass a headers value. And the headers, the name of the header that you'd like to use will be API sign. Okay, API sign, and we pass the sign there to it. All right, so so those are the two things you need. You need the actual endpoint, followed by the parameters together with that particular endpoint, and then you need a signed version of that endpoint with your API secret, and you pass it as a header together with the GET request. Okay. So once we have that response, then we can try to call Bittrex again, and according to the API, check out balance. Okay, the expected result should look something like this. Okay, so you have the result variable right there, and your balance will be a variable called balance inside the result key for this response object. Okay, so similar to what we did here, we'll go ahead and fetch that result again, and we'll say that our current balance for XMR will be result balance, which we can then display together with our output string, right? So I'll say val is equal to balance. Okay, so hopefully this works. Let's try it out again. Not that. Okay, let me just review this. So we compute the net difference, we get the URL balance, we encrypt it using SHA-512 together with our API secret, and then we pass that as part of the header using a variable called API. I think it should just be here. API sign, and then we fetch the results and then display it right there. Okay, sleep for 10 seconds and then rinse and repeat. Right? Okay. Let's try to run this again. Oh, sorry. Just cancel. Crap. Let's try to run that again. Right. Undefined method. Just try to bring this back. Alright, it's interrupted. Alright, so we have an error at line 46. Balance result. Balance is not. Okay, let's go ahead and dump this. Let's see what's happening here. Before we display that, let's try to run this. Oh, API key not provided. Alright. My API key right there. It's weird. Alright. How did I pass my API key? How do I pass my API key? Oh, it shouldn't have an underscore. It should be API key right there. And then currency is equal to BTC. Okay, so I forgot other parameters. So I need API key, right, without the underscore. And I need the currency that I'd like to get my balance from. So I'll put in another parameter here called currency, which is equal to my market. No, not market, but rather my market coin. I'm gonna have that as a separate variable instead. Market coin will be equal to config market coin. I'll also have the base coin, config base coin. So basically I'm just decomposing this to its own corresponding variable so I can use it later on. Okay, and then this one will be market coin. Right? So given those variables, I can then put that as part of the URL. Right, so my currency will now become market coin. So we have a value called market coin, and my API key will just be API key. API key, the variable, and API key without an underscore, the parameter. Right, let's see if this works. Balance not defined. Right, because I deleted this. So I'll say balance is equal to response result. Actually I had something like result equals response result, so then this one will just become result balance. Alright, it's not working. Okay, let's try this again. Let's see what gets out of a response. Oh, well, it's working actually. Yeah, it's working. Alright, I think I just forgot to save it, or it took a while before it actually queried for the values. Alright, so let's try this again. Ruby mean.rb. Come on, work. Stop working. Why isn't it working? There's something here. One more time. What? That's weird. What's wrong? Dot get headers, blah blah blah. But actually, it's fetching the values. Okay, sorry. I had a puts equals response right there. Hang on. Right, so I have, I just like to puts response. Just remove this first. Right, so the result is there. Okay, balance. I know I'm getting the balance, so this one should work. Result and balance. Alright, probably some weird glitch. Alright, let's try that again. Okay, there we go. Alright, so I think we can still improve on this more. Let's round up the value for the net diff. Just round it up to 2 decimal, or probably 3 decimal places. Try to run this again. Right. Alright. Okay, so as you can see, right, this is the bid price. My last sell was 0.1962988. And then it's getting the balance for this wallet, and I have a net profit of it means that if I actually sold this coin at this moment, then I would have lost 7.246% of my profits, of my current investment. Okay, and just to test it, right, if my target, okay, let me hard code the target here. Okay, so if my target was something like way below, let's say it was 0.17, right? Let's say this was 0.17. Okay. Oh, sorry, not my target, but rather my last sell. Okay, so let's say my last sell was 0.17. Okay. Basically, after we take the values and we find out that the ratio, the net diff, is greater than my target, greater than my initial greater than or equal to my target, right? So if my net diff, or the net diff, is greater than or equal to the target percentage that I'd like sell the coin, then essentially I'll go ahead and perform a sell operation. Right? Puts net, or rather, I'll just have something here called sell now. Sell now. Right? So let's see if I sell now. It's taking a while to query. Something's not working. Okay, there we go. Right, so assuming that my target, my last sell was 0.17 and the bid is 0.18, it means I have a net of 5.791%, which in turn I would, of course, sell now. Right. All right, so in summary, this first video for this series will just show how we can interact with the Bittrex API. Get the current ticker mark for the market, so I can actually run it in a loop and just run it indefinitely. Get my current balance, get the last price, which I hard code in my config file, and then if it reaches a certain percentage target of gains or of net gains, then I decide to sell. Of course, if it doesn't, then I won't do anything. I just basically wait for the market to go up before I actually sell that coin. So, all right, so that's it for this devlog, and there's still a lot of improvements for this, such as wrapping it up inside a class, um, doing some cleanups or doing some traps wherein if the request actually fails, then you have to catch it and all those things. But by itself, it's already a working bot that will tell me what the current price is of a certain coin, what my last sell was, and what my net profit is, right? And I can get the current balance, my current balance for that coin, and if the market is good, I essentially sell. Rather, the bot sells, and I just wait, wait to gain a profit. Right. So I guess that's it for this devlog.